Hi, I'm Matt Dietrich from Reboot, Illinois. Last week on Only in Illinois, I showed you a few simple tips for finding and sorting information on candidate contributions using the Illinois State Board of Elections website. This week we're going to continue, but we're going to do it slightly differently. I'm going to show you how to look at candidates' quarterly reports. This will allow you to not only see what they've received in contributions, but also how they spent those contributions. To do that, we're going to start in the same place. That's here at the Illinois Board of Elections website. So, let's get started.
Just as we did last week, we're going to start this week at the Illinois Board of Elections website, which is www.elections.il.gov. From there, we're going to select in the top pages Committee Search. Committee Search may not always appear here in the top pages. If you don't see Committee Search, click on View All Top Pages and it'll be there somewhere. It stays in the top 5 because it's a fairly popular search. So we click on that. We start by choosing Contains in committee name, not Starts with. In this case, we're going to look at Governor Pat Quinn's most recent quarterly report, which was from October of 2014. So we'll type in the last name Quinn and click Search. Here we see that there are 3 candidates named Quinn, but we know that taxpayers for Quinn, in this case, is Governor Quinn's campaign. And if you're not sure, and if you come up with several candidates, just click on each one, and right here on the purpose, it will tell you who the candidate is. If you do not see a quarterly report listed here, you'll want to keep going screen by screen until you find one. The reason you'll see all of these A1 $1,000 plus reports is that candidates are required to report any contribution of $1,000 or more within 5 days of receiving it. And within 30 days of the election, that time period goes down to within, I believe, 3 days. If you see only A1s on the first screen, go down here, click Next, and scroll until you find a quarterly report. So here we have the quarterly report from July 1st, 2014 till September 30th, 2014. Click on that, and you'll get this screen. This gives you an idea of everything that a candidate has received and spent in the previous quarter. Now, last week we looked at how to search individual contributions a different way, but here you can see that they've summarized them for the quarter. What we're interested in today, though, is not what they received, but how they spent it. And for that, you'll scroll all the way down to Expenditures. And here we can see that during the third quarter of 2014, the Quinn campaign spent about $14.9 million. What did they spend it on? That's what we're going to find out today. So, you click here on Itemized. You can do this on any of these. Today we're just going to focus on expenditures. Now, here is a big difference between the kind of search we did last week where we were just looking at contributions. On that search, you had an option to download the data. You don't get the download option when you're working on a quarterly report. So, what you're faced with is either going through 1,901 separate contributions page by page, and each page contains 25. Or, in a more simple way, is simply click Print This List. That will put all 1,900 of these expense reports into one screen, one document, one very long document. So there, this is a printable list. Once you've got the data like this, it's easy to put it into a spreadsheet, and that's where we can do some fairly interesting things with it. So just as we did last week, we're going to use a Google document spreadsheet. And as I said then, if you're used to Microsoft Excel, and if you have that on your computer, use that. If you use a different spreadsheet program, use that. The searches and filter functions will all be basically the same. But we're going to use Google Documents today because everyone has access to it, And the first thing we want to do is we want to copy this onto our clipboard. So to do that, you click once somewhere on the screen to make it active, and then you're going to do a Control A, or if you're using a Mac, you'll want to do Command A. But on a PC, you'll do Control A, which copies everything. And then you'll want to do Control C, which places it onto your clipboard. So now you have 1,900 separate lines on your clipboard. And now we're going to go to google.com. And in my case, I have my Google Drive set up, and that's what we're going to work in today so that we can sort through some of this data. When your Google Drive page comes up, click Create, and then click Spreadsheet. You can give your spreadsheet a name. Then you want to click in this box to make sure that your spreadsheet is the active window on your computer. Once you've done that, we're going to copy all of our data into this spreadsheet by using Control V. So here we have our columns that show who the expense was paid to, and again, those appear in alphabetical order. Their address, which isn't important to us, the amounts of the expenses, and the purpose. And for our purposes today, we're going to take a special look at the received by and the amount and the purpose. But here's where things get a little more tricky than they were last week. When you deposit your data into the spreadsheet on the quarterly reports, the amount on the expenditures is in the same line with the date. That's a problem for us because we want to be able to sort these by the amount. And we're not so much concerned really about the date because all of these will have fallen in one quarter. To get around this, we're going to use a simple spreadsheet function called a split to create two different columns, one which will contain the dollar amounts and the other which will contain the date. To do this, the first thing we want to do is add two more columns to the right of the amount column. Simply go up here to this drop-down menu and add Insert One Right, and then do it one more time. Insert one more column to the right. We do this because we're going to split this column here into two different cells. Cell number D is going to be our new amount column. In order to do this, you have to exercise a fairly simple little piece of code, and we're going to split this column. So to do that, we click in the blank cell right next to the column that we want to split, and you type in the following command: $, the word split, and then in parentheses, you want to do the column, the letter of the column where your split is going to take place. So in our case, it's C. And then what line the split starts on. And in this case, it starts on line number 5. So we put a 5 immediately after the C. Then you place a comma. Then you place a quotation mark. Now, the next item the next character shows where the split is supposed to happen. And in our case, the most convenient way to do this is to make a split right at the decimal point. What this means is we're going to lose the cents amount. But in our case, that's not so important, because this is going to give us a good ballpark figure of how much each candidate is spending and what they're spending on. So we'll put a decimal point in there and then close it in quotation marks, and close that with another parentheses, close parentheses. Once you've done that, go right over to column E and click in it. You see that the split has happened. Now what you want to do is apply this to all of your columns. So to do that, you click in here and you place your cursor over the little blue square at the bottom and you drag. And you continue dragging all the way down to the bottom of the column. As I showed you last week, once you get all of these numbers into a spreadsheet, there's no limit to the amount of searching and discovering you can do. Let's use the filter function to find out what they're spending it on. Let's click Filter. Let's use a filter and find out what kind of money Pat Quinn spent on media buys during the third quarter. The first thing we'll do is clear everything. Then we're going to scroll down to Media Buy. We'll click that, and then we're going to click OK. That's going to filter it down so that the only thing that's visible now to us are media buys. And as we can see, you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lines. One very handy thing with Google Documents is if you highlight numeric amounts, it will give you a running total of the spending. Okay, so we highlighted all of the amounts that were spent on media buy, and we see that the Quinn campaign in the third quarter of 2014 spent $10.9 million on media. Since we have this isolated simply on media buys, that's going to allow us to look at what the campaign spent on specific TV and radio stations. So let's use our filter to find out what the Quinn campaign spent on a specific television station. Spent with a specific television station. In this case, let's do WGN TV. First, let's clear everything. And then we want to click on just WGN. Then you click OK. Here are all of the expenditures for the quarter with television station WGN in Chicago. If we highlight column D, the one that we created with our whole dollar amounts, and we scroll down, you can see the running tally, and it looks like in the third quarter, the Quinn campaign spent $550,729 with WGN TV. It's pretty simple once you learn the code of how to split this particular column into dollars and dates. Once you've mastered how to use the filter function and simply dragging and selecting dollar amounts, it's pretty easy to go through and find out what the campaign spent its money on, who received the most, and you can also get a pretty good idea of what it costs to run a campaign. The figures are quite a bit lower when you get to the state rep and state senator level, but they're still pretty high, and you'll get an idea of, for example, what candidates need to spend for payroll, how much they spend on advertising, how much they spend for events, all different kinds of things. It is a good way to look into what your elected officials go through, how much money they raise, how much they spend, and what they spend it on. As always, the reason for doing this in large part is to simply encourage you to get onto the State Board of Elections website and find out what's there. It's probably the best way to find out about our political system.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's Only in Illinois. I hope this helps you and encourages you to get on the Illinois State Board of Elections website and take a look at what candidates are receiving and how they're spending and anything else you want to look for. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on next week's Only in Illinois.